a lot of this started with tracking fears and shadows and then going towards the ones that I felt like I could dare to go towards.
Yeah.
And so I just want to touch on something underlying what you just said. You know, we're afraid of certain elements of sexuality, but we're really also afraid of feeling and raw emotion. And I think that's why sexuality can be challenging for men, because there's all this conditioning around wanting to be like a good lover or a good whatever.
Yo, lovers. Welcome to Sex, Love, and Everything in Between. We're the O'Neills. You're here with Meg and Jacob.
And this is the place we have really uncensored conversations about sex, intimacy, and relationships. We're super excited you're here. Enjoy this episode.
Hey, lovers. Welcome to another episode of Sex, Love, and Everything in Between. Meg is out at Social Brew with O'Sheen. They're having a day out. Got the house to myself, so I thought I would invite probably our weirdest guest. And, I say that with love, but this guy here sitting beside me, his name's Dane Tomas, and welcome to the show, bro.
Hey, bro.
Good to have you here. I feel like I said this to Meg when I read your post. I'm like, I feel like we would have been really good friends at primary school. I feel like the way that you write, it's like, I feel more understood whenever I read your content. And it's a crazy thing to say because you live a very, very different way or you've come through a journey that is very, very different to mine, especially, a lot of this personal development world or the spiritual world. A lot of your stuff to me was just like eye-opening. And I'm just going to reference a few other bros that have been like really pivotal in my perspective shifts. Tyron, who's a good brother of yours, Danny Redbart and other guys. These were guys that were in in the sexuality space that was like terrifying to me.
And my fellow like slutty Viking kind of dudes.
The slutty Viking bros. Yeah. And like I was terrified of all of you because my understanding of the world was man, woman, dog, 2 cars, house, working a job for 50 years. And then I started to explore plant medicine, and then I got connected to like the light spirituality, this kind of floaty, just surrender to the universe. And then I started to explore this, like I started to feel the deeper stuff coming through for me. And you guys were a real permission slip for me to start to explore desires that I, in the past, would have labeled as fucked up, gross, weird, gay, bi, all of those things. And it's, and I still really love all of your posts because I can feel beneath your content there's this deeper energetic kind of undertone to what you're saying. It's like I'm sharing this not from a place of I'm right or I'm wrong, but I'm sharing it from a place of like this is what I've inquired with and where I'm currently at. And I think it's so fucking important, especially with what's going on in the world. And with the rise of the trad life movement. And I sometimes feel a little bit like that's what I want. And at times I've got to check myself and be like, okay, cool. Where am I still trying to hold on to or try to control my life? So yeah, bro, it's so good to have you here. And I think you're going to give a really wicked perspective on a way of relating and sex and spirituality that we haven't had on the show yet. So thanks for being here.
Love that. Super happy to be here.
So I want to just start straight at the crux of our relating styles. Like I'm monogamous. I'm married. I've got a kid. I live in the suburbs. I have a dog. It's like so classic. I feel it's so classic, but for me, it's really fulfilling. And even like from a perspective, like it looks like that, but for me, the relationship that Meg and I have is very deep, and we've explored many different worlds and realms when it comes to our relationship. So for you, like polyamory is how you would say poly, or can you just give us give us a rundown of like relationship styles for you and or your relationship style and how that looks, or can you give us a definition as best you can?
Yeah, and it's tricky because I feel like I'm going to use a whole bunch of buzzwords, and I, up until very recently, have avoided a lot of those and then found myself going, it's actually useful to use some of these categories just for my own clarity and also communicating to people, especially because I spend a lot of time in like the Tantra world and I've been kind of traveling the world a lot the last couple of years at different events, festivals, yada, yada, yada. So at the risk of sounding like a bunch of buzzwords all at once, but I would say currently I see myself as solo poly, which is hilarious when I wrote about that, because some guy's like, don't you just mean fucking single? Because it's like and really, I guess for me, this stuff it's a lot deeper than the structure, like I know that on the surface, it's like, I mean, really there's really only three possibilities of structure, right? There's monogamous, non-monogamous / poly, which people would debate what those mean, but let's just put those together. And there's celibate. And to me, all three of those parts are valid. I have embodied all of them at different times. And even sometimes it kind of gets confusing to explain, because they kind of start to merge and blend and be not so blatantly split, like I technically am married, even though Mia lives in Berlin and travels the world, and we're, romantically pretty complete, but we're still something, And we journeyed about 5 years of open marriage, but some points in time inside that open marriage, very monogamous energies and moments and times, and other times super open, poly, coming back from lovers' houses and cuddling up and going, okay, I'm going to have a sleepover with blah, blah, blah on the weekend. Okay, I love that for you. Or like, well, I'm not happy that you're going to do, all that stuff. But to me, I don't know if that shit matters that much. To me, it's just structure, It's like whether you drive a 4-wheel drive or a hatchback or a motorbike, like it's still transport, and it's still how you get to where you're going to go. And I think what's more important is how we're doing love and how we embody love and how we do relating and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, if we want to put it in categories, at the current moment, I would, if forced to fill out a quiz, be like, okay, solo poly best explains how I'm living. And what that means to me is that it's not really structured around anyone else. So for a long time, my poly experiences were more of an open relating with a primary partner situation, where it's kind of like, okay, I want to connect with this person, but I need to make sure that flows with my wife, which is is a cool place to be. And, in the last 2 years, fully transitioning to like, cool, so this is between me and the universe, and me and whoever. And no one has veto power over anything. No one, so really there's been a flattening of hierarchy and what kind of American relationship nerds would call relationship anarchy is closer to how I'm living. And it's really about navigating love and sex and eros in the moment. And what's happened to me a lot from living this life is like the categories start to melt, like there are friends that I used to be lovers with that we're not necessarily sexual, but I fucking deeply love these humans like I would, as much as I would a partner or anything else, it's really, the categories have melted a lot for me over the last few years, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it feels like like you said, you've embodied each of the styles or each of the relationship structures, which a lot of people either they're like, I'm this and I'm never going to be that, but they've never actually opened themselves to what that could be or what they could learn. And I'm not like, I've never done an open relating style of relationship with Meg. We've been together 10 years, but we've had like over the last few years, we've had beautiful, beautiful experiences where people could call that open relating in how we speak or how we move in community. Yeah. And that's where I like what you've said. Like there was some melting of the rigidity for me of like what monogamy was.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't get around these guys that are hectic monogamous and they're like, anyone that isn't your wife you're not allowed to spend time with the opposite sex. I won't leave my woman in. She's not allowed to talk to another man unless I'm in the room. And these quite hectic kind of rigid styles, I would identify as monogamous, but I can't agree with the conditions that they've put on that monogamous structure.
And so this is where we get to, the reasons why people are doing things are more interesting to me than what sort of category they put themselves in. And so it's just as there's, I don't know what to call those dudes, but I don't really like their vibe at all, you know? And it's kind of like this flashback to like fucking 1300s Christianity or like, you know, fundamentalist Islam of like the wife stays in the home. It's like, is that David Data or is that Sharia law? Like, what's happening here? It sounds a little bit, you know.
They overshot the landing at like the Data airport. And they've just
they really landed in fucking repression territory. And it's the same as like there is so many spiritual coaches and teachers and influencers, and they're like, it's sacred union. And I'm like, okay, like technically you've taken an idea that was meant to be between you and like the beloved, you know, you're quoting like Rumi and you think it's about your boyfriend. It's like, that's between you and God, you know?
Yes.
And now it's like sacred union can only happen if you're like married and you sleep on a bed of rose petals. And it's like, bitch, sacred union is between you, and you can share that with another person and you can be with them for 20 years. But a lot of those ideas are just really being basically, I mean, I did a post this morning. My main beef, we've kind of gone left already, but let's just roll with it.
Yeah.
It's with spiritual materialism, right?
Yes.
And so it's where someone takes a spiritual concept and tries to make that about 3D reality. And we see this with like, I'm a goddess, you worship the goddess. And it's like, tantric worship of the goddess would be seeing the divine in your partner, not getting confused that she is in fact this is a human person and I love her and that's great. And then when I, you know, cultivate a certain level of devotion, I'm able to see the universe through her. But this kind of materializing these concepts just takes us into like really weird places, and mostly people are just doing it to justify what they already believe, which, you know, David Data concepts turn into reinforcing the 1950s of like, you know, I want my wife barefoot and pregnant and having 8 kids and we all drink raw milk. And it's like, okay, what is wrong with you people? And why do you, that's fine, but why do you then need to kind of try to legislate that for others? And I think that's where the friction happens. But I also just want to say, just as that is like a, to me, really ignorant application of monogamy, there's plenty of people out there doing quote unquote polyamory, and it just kind of means fucking around and, you know, using that to justify being non-committal, which is not even wrong, but it's like, it would be true to be like, I just like to keep things casual, you know? Whereas for me, polyamory is not really that casual. It's like a lot of work.
Yes.
And a lot of deep commitment. So there's this projection of like, poly is for people who can't commit. And it's like, is it really? Because I feel like I've committed to like the advanced setting of loving the last fucking 8 years. So, you know.
And that's the thing, like, yeah, there's that idea of like the poly. And I think it's so easy to smash the poly community around like, oh, you guys just aren't committal, avoidant.
Yeah.
Like you don't have any direction. You're not willing to, you know, commit to anything. You're not willing to be devoted. And it's like, I don't actually believe that when you do go into the deeper practice of it, that's the truth. And just watching some people online and the way that they communicate about poly, it's just like, I don't like it, you're trying to teach something that I don't think you've really fully like deepened with.
And here's a tricky thing, because it really is an emergent style. So like monogamy, for good or bad, you can find a lot of references.
Yes.
And you have to kind of look hard to find really good ones, but there's plenty of them if you look, right, of healthy relationships and people who have unpacked what that looks like and how to do it well. Poly and ethical non-monogamy, you know, it's still fringe, like it's growing, but it's still really fringe. And so like for me, I had to, and I was lucky, I was in alternative communities and I had older open relators and poly people and relationship anarchy people and whatever you want to, tantric slutty people, wild, freed up people who were fucking living very differently to what I knew. So there was references of, I like how they did that. I don't like how such and such managed that. Oh, that was a mess. You know, I got to gather some of those, but it's rarer. So, you know, and it's one of the other classic things like, poly doesn't work. I tried it once and it's like, okay, so did you try monogamy once and then quit? Oh, you've tried monogamy 15 times and you still only average at it if we're honest, you know? You're still just about getting by, but you tried poly once and so then the system of poly is what's broken. Really, at the end of the day, it's people's ability to relate, people's ability to love, people's ability to navigate their own nervous system is what's going to determine good relating, regardless of what little category you choose, you know?
Yeah. So if we were like, let's bring some containment to this conversation so we don't end up on the moon, but what were some of the key things that you took, like that were deep learnings or that you feel you got from polyamory? That, like, for me, one of the things that I see is like, you definitely have to learn how to fucking communicate.
Yep.
But what are some of the key things that you've taken from your experience with that kind of relationship?
I think one of the biggest ones for me is learning to understand the human nervous system, both my own and a partner/partners/lovers. And because there's things people can like ideologically believe. I believe we're allowed to be free. Jacob, you're free to do whatever you want. And then it's like, why the fuck did you do that? I hate you. And it's like, when people do things too quick, too fast, then triggers happen a lot more, right?
Yes.
And so one thing I learned early on was like a little traffic light system for communication of like with your partner, talking about, okay, I'm going on a date with such and such. And okay, well, if you guys have a cuddle and a make out, that's green. I fully would celebrate that.
Yeah.
If you guys like, I don't know, got naked together and maybe had oral, that would be yellow. It would be a little stretch, but I'd be okay with it. If you go over there and fuck her and don't come home tonight, that would be red for me. That would be more than I could handle, and I know that. And so that gives a sort of reality of like, don't, like I didn't have a lot of rules in my relationship with Mia, but we basically had an understanding of like, let's just not redline each other's nervous systems.
Yeah, that's a great fact. That could be any relationship.
Right.
Let's not redline each other's nervous systems.
And the only difference is with kind of open relating and poly, you're increasing potentially the number of opportunities to do that because you're exposing vulnerable things. But I mean, raising 2 kids and running a business together, you know, already you've still got the possibility for redlining each other's nerves quite a lot, you know?
Yeah.
But that thing of like, okay, potentially I'm going to go fuck someone else. Ooh, that's a spike right there for most people a lot of the time. And so learning how to dance with that and what's, you know, learning what healthy stretch is versus like, yeah, I'm okay with everything. Oh, that was way too much for me. And it doesn't, you know, you don't just shrug it off the next day. It's going to be sometimes hard to move through, sometimes irreparable to move through. So like that for me, that is deeper than like communication skills. Yes, epic, but like understanding that the nervous system has capacity limits. They can grow over time. You know, there's things I would experience now that 5 years ago would have put me in a panic or a fucking, you know, borderline psychotic paranoid episode. I'm like, I felt a mild contraction when you said you wanted to spend the night with him. And then I had a workout and self-pleasure and then it's gone. Love that for you guys. And it's like, that would have been death once. And now it's like a minor thing to process that might take me 20 minutes, you know? And I'm not saying I've become some immortal, like touch wood. There's still things that could trigger me, but the capacity has changed a lot over time. And it's just understanding that, yeah, there's like a mental, emotional side to it. But for me, kind of nervous system is king. At the end of the day, we're triggering potential survival, fight, flight, freeze type responses if we go too hard, too fast. And I think that's what I see with like young poly couples. It's like, cool, we're free to do whatever we want, whenever we want. It's like, yeah, but like, do you care about that guy? Because that's going to fuck with him a lot. And there's going to be a limit, you know? There's going to be an amount that is the right amount at the right time. And I think that's where the skills have to develop.
Yeah, for me, even just like applying that to my relationship style, like I get to a point sometimes where like my nervous system has reached its window of tolerance.
Yep.
And the woman that I deeply love is now the person I resent out of everyone in the world. I'm like, why am I even in this relationship? Why is she asking me to fill her water bottle again? Why is she doing it? And it's like, I have reached my capacity.
Yes.
And I could only imagine that in a poly relationship, there would be like, maybe it might not be as developed, like as drip fed. It might be like you said, the spikes. Do you feel that there is any of that kind of like drip feed that can slowly infiltrate a poly relationship like that? There's
different approaches, you know, and like one, I've dabbled with different worlds and borrowed from each of them. And one is more like, let's call it the trauma-informed nervous system, lots of communication, having our little spreadsheets of who's seeing who when kind of, I call that like California poly, It's very nerdy.
Cali poly.
And then there's kind of more like mystery school, wild, free tantra poly, which is like, I'm just going to throw myself on the altar and let myself be cracked open to love or whatever, and that they both can work. And what has worked for me better is having an awareness of both sides and mixing and matching. And because one side is working off, let's carefully try to navigate and be respectful and not trigger each other and have a kind of psychological awareness and lots of conversations. And it's skillful, but can be exhausting in itself. Like I had someone first kind of tantra babe I dated in like 2012, 2013. And she was like, well, I'm going to be dating you. And I'm going to be... I was like, no, I am on a mission. I don't need to be sitting around with all you poly people having your little fucking meetings to manage emotions. I seen what you guys are like. What a mess. I was like my hungry entrepreneur era. And I knew that style of having little process meetings all the time, I was like, what the hell is wrong with you people?
I hate those.
Yeah. And I have a little more tolerance and enjoyment even for that now, but also because it's not my only method. Like I can source myself in deep connection to nature, to spirit, to self. Like I've had multiple deaths in my life in the last few years, and I've really tried to use those to help open me into like surrender. And after having like a best friend die, my dad die, a mentor die, and really trying to be with those things that kind of fucking tore me open. Compared to that, being upset that someone I'm with is sleeping over at someone else's house, it just seems kind of small. It's like, it's like a minor inconvenience, It's like they're going to be alive and well tomorrow. We'll cuddle in the morning, like no big deal. But it's because some part of me has gotten better at sourcing itself in like the void or whatever, or in God or in connection to, beingness.
You've got what I'm trying to understand, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is like you're able to source what you need without going to that person.
Largely.
Yes.
Like I'm not saying I've like transcended my need for human connection and care. That's still very important. And I've learned this from other people who I've witnessed them be, it's like, oh, she really kind of handles a lot of this herself. And we process what we need to process, but there's a deep self-connection and reliance. And I feel like that's also a part where, people are jumping in open, relating, and poly, and it's like, why? That's, I think, so for me, I want to meet all of myself and be as unlimited of an expression of a human being as I possibly can, right? And so facing triggers around jealousy and insecurity is like, cool, that's on the track of that's the mountain I want to climb anyway. So this process is helping me speed up my growth, This is not primarily someone whose goal is to like build a family, build a business, my main goal is not like stable structure. My main goal is like spiritual evolution in life, And so I see this as a speeder upper of that. So and it still doesn't mean I'm down for every trigger every time. Like I still manage what I'm available for, but that puts me very different than when, I have friends who are like, just had their second kid, and they're like, why do you even do it? And I'm like, okay, it's going to be kind of hard to transplant into this would not support your world right now. This would be the worst thing you guys could do right now. For me, because the goal is to kind of be God, if you like, is to be connected to, the one and to live, as humanly possible, to bring that through my life. This speeds that up. This is part of that practice. So that gives me a much bigger reason than like, me and the wife want to spice things up a bit. It's like, okay, like
lingerie.
Yeah.
Let's go to bras and things.
Yeah. Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yes.
It's like, if that's all you really want, like try some handcuffs or something, you don't need to fuck someone else. Maybe you do. I don't know.
I feel like that it's your path and you're not going to force it on anyone else either. I can feel that like you're very clear. Like if you want to if you want to have a conversation around it, I'm going to speak to it. I can be a bit cheeky online and throw out the bait. But like for me, it's like you're doing this primarily for yourself, not for anyone else.
Yes, and I do see and desire that there is the potential for embodied spiritual community where relationship style is more consciously chosen, and where that mixture of all these different styles is kind of speeding up growth and creating more magic, interconnection, etc., which is not the same as I want everyone monogamous to like. It's not that.
Yeah.
But I do have a desire to, I guess, deconstruct some of the assumptions that are built into mainstream society, and I think this is where the kind of poly-mono argument, which online it can be in that format, which I don't really agree with. But one of the reasons that people who really identify with monogamy and traditional structure who can be on their high horse are missing is you guys are in the privileged position. You live in a society that's built for you. And, if you fill out a form or like someone's fucking dying in a hospital bed or whatever, it's like, cool, so you're the husband? And it's like, no, I'm a member of a 7-part polypod who have, these fuckers could have loved each other for 17 years and be deeply, it's like, system doesn't recognize that. It's like, you have a certificate from a priest. It's like, okay, let's just unravel.
I was the priest last week. This week I'm not.
You know what I mean? Like basically what it's like anything, when the structure is supporting our mode of being, we tend to not need to question the structure. And as soon as you start dancing outside of it, you're like, hang on a minute, this isn't fair. It's like if I'm in a wheelchair, suddenly I get very aware that there's not a lot of ramps. If I'm not, it's like steps. They're great, you know?
Yeah. I think the awareness piece, and I like what you said around creating a space where you could essentially like a community or something where you could go and explore the different, like what's beneath all of these structures. Yeah. That for me is like, that's something that I feel like with the community that I've got here on the Gold Coast, and we've really like nurtured and loved up on the last few years. There's people that I have a deep relationship with that isn't really like, it's not that we go out on dates or make out or fuck even. It's energetically like we're intimate. Like I know things about you. I share I've shared experiences with you that are deeply intimate that have nothing to do with a physical sensation or a friction.
Which to kind of whatever these guys were using as example for, to those guys, that's already a radical level of openness.
Yeah. So for me, that was, and I didn't realize that because I've done the erotic blueprint. And for me, I'm an energetic, whatever that is. Yeah. Yep. And for me, like feeling is like the energetic experience is so important for me.
You're energetically non-monogamous.
Energetically non-monogamous. Yes, I'm fringe, finally.
Categories, bro.
No one can understand me. I'm so different. Yeah.
Get your energy back over there.
But for me, that was that gave me an understanding of I really like energetic depth, or like even the conversations we were having. Like I've only met you once at our friend's wedding, and then we were standing there talking about some radical shit without even asking, how your day was. There was this really cool, and for me, like that level of like energetic alignment at where we're going with these conversations. Like this is exciting for me.
Yeah.
And it's something that like feeds me, and I'm like, I feel like I leave feeling like filled up after these sort of conversations, and I'm finding that the more I open to those moments, the more range I have for life.
Yeah.
Rather than being like, no, Dane and I have to talk about what we said we're going to talk about, which was this, this, and this, and I had a series of questions, this, and this, and we that wouldn't actually serve where I want to go or what I want to experience in this life. So I think, I'm really, really liking that.
Love that. A thing just popped in my head is like probably about 2, maybe 3 years ago, I was in a situation where married and have a girlfriend, and my wife and girlfriend are best friends. And I'm at a party in Byron, not really with them. They're there, but they're doing their own thing. I'm just cuddled up in the corner all night with 2 girls, 3 girls, different people, holding hands, talking, nothing sexual is happening, but there's a lot of intimacy, a lot of just like, I've always liked this person. Here we are, just smushed up on the couch, watching the evening, and I come home that night and I'm hanging out with Mia and Maz, and they're kind of like lovingly teasing me, going, you got to have your little Cancerian slutty cuddles all night. I'm so happy for you, babe. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I guess because the world we've been navigating is, the tricky part is like, okay, fucking someone else is still kind of a deal that we need to work through. But that leaves a reality where cuddles and hand holding and eye contact, which 10 years before in the relationship I was in would have been like, you sat at a party with another woman holding hands and talking all night? Like, what the fuck, Would it be so unacceptable? And I had this moment of this just gratitude of like, it's not just about this sex thing and date. It's like for that type of intimacy to be freely available and no one is shamed or triggered or threatened by it. In fact, it's, they were teasing me, but they were loving me. I'm like, you're getting that's what you need, isn't it? I'm like, that's what I mostly need is a lot of cuddles, Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, I'm just allowed to be myself, and like, yeah, nothing erotic involved, but because eros and more challenging things have been navigated, that leaves these small intimacies that would be radical for a lot of people really available. And it was like, I could never go back to a world where that wasn't welcome and celebrated. That would be detrimental to my life.
Yeah. Well put, man. And I think that, like, I'm just thinking of like the extreme, let's call it the extreme right of like where guys can't even like, they'll shake a hand, but they can't even like that's the extent of like friendship. Like we shake hands and like, and
don't look in my eyes for too long.
And that is a, for me, because men's work is my primary service to the world. It's like we create intimacy at these men's events, which is so crazy because by the end of it, everyone's like running around, like cuddling, jumping on each other. There's like guys just like huddled up around a fire or like just arm in arms. Like, intimacy is such an important piece that we're missing or that we're enforcing on one other person our entire life.
And like the demand for one person to provide all of that when, as far as we know, we're pretty much built for like little hunter-gatherer bands that will be touching all the time, sitting around, leaning on each other, that level of group regulation and connection is what we're built for. And we wonder why we're all, two parents, two kids sitting in front of the television set, working 50 hours a week. It's like, why do I feel like something's missing? It's like we're deeply connected, like as like social primates, and it's like, if you look at someone else, I'll hate you. And it's like, okay, that's not healthy.
It's funny that you say that because like when we have, because I love having people at the house. Like that's my thing. And Meg didn't grow up like that as much, but she's now like really like we love having people in the house because it creates a different structure for intimacy to occur.
Yeah.
And whether that's just one other person, whether it's a man or woman, or we have like 5 people over, all of a sudden there's a whole new dynamic for intimacy to reveal itself, whether it's like instead of Meg and I eating dinner and then sitting down and watching another episode, so boom, the board games come out, or the guitar comes out, or we're at the back or we're on the jiu-jitsu mats and we're rolling around, and it's like it's all of these things that we start to do that create more connection. And I think there's what I'm learning from you and from other people that have opened my eyes to this other structure, which I've never really experienced, but I've only seen. It's like, this isn't about me going and fucking someone else just to say that I've done it. So I've now done the poly thing. No, I don't want to do it. It's like, can I just open my aperture a little and like widen my lens and be like, cool, all right, I actually want to hold this person's hand. I want to give this guy a hug, or I want to like pick this woman up and spin her around and like at the party, or I want to go and have a deep conversation around this topic with this person. And that's not going to mean anything other than I'm following what feels good.
It just means many loves. Polyamory technically means loving many, which could look so many different ways.
Yeah.
Epic,
man. You cool to shift gears?
Fuck yeah.
Let's do it. I feel complete. Sex magic.
Hey.
This is something I've been wanting to, like, I think read so much about your stuff. And I'm like, there's a selfish part of me for this podcast. Like, I need to understand what sex magic is for you, because like when I got into, and there's a whole heap of podcasts if you want to go back and listen, Meg like surprised me with a sex dungeon once, and like it redlined me at a specific point when I was bent over tied to this horse. But like for me, like sex magic, I explored butt play, I explored self-pleasure practices, and I started to do that because I because Meg was having a sexual awakening, so to speak, and she was exploring this wider range of pleasure. And I was like, whatever she's experiencing and how that's translating into her radiance, into her business success, and into the woman that she's bringing me, like, I want to explore this. I can see that there's value in this, and I want to explore my own sexuality a little more.
Yep.
And like from having a wank on the toilet to then to up leveling to running a bath, lighting candles, and using oils and different things, and like touching other parts of my body, non-erogenous zones, and feeling all of this new sensitivity come online. That was fucking earth shattering for me. But I'd love to know, like, kind of give us the rundown on sex magic, because I feel it goes so much more than just, learning how to touch yourself and what it can mean for like manifestation or creation in your life.
So where to start, really? We know what sex is. Magic for me is about intentional creation of results, And so when we bring sexuality and magic together, it's about using erotic activation, sexuality for intentional purposes. So that could be self-connection, that could be connection to a greater whole, like the cosmos. Like I run something called church. It's a group self-pleasure ritual, and church be a little bit cheeky, but it's also like through this practice we're connecting to the divine. We don't need a priest on stage to do that for us. We can go direct through the body. We can use it for transformation. We can use it for manifestation. We can use it for healing. We can use it for connection, community, etc. So really that can look a lot of different ways. Like it could be candles in the bath. You could still have a wank on the toilet, and it still be sex magic. I will often take my goals into my self-pleasure practice. And so how that might look is firstly a stage of just connecting to the body, and usually like, yes, a more holistic approach. So touching whole body would be part of that, not just straight for the cock, but also there's nothing wrong with that either. So really connecting to the body and finding like activation and arousal with no real focus other than the body. And then at a certain point, like once there is a, what in chaos magic they would call gnosis, once you're starting to enter like a bliss state or an altered state, then you might look at images, recite a mantra, hold a picture in your mind, and from a slightly more scientific point of view, or just grounding it in what's actually happening, what you're really doing is using the state the fact that you're super impressionable during arousal to essentially drop a goal or an image or intention from like the conscious part of your mind deep into the deep unconscious. So it's a bit like you might use hypnosis, but in my opinion, 10 times stronger, because we all come hardwired with the fact that we have an arousal circuitry, and most of us have played with it a lot of times already. So there's a pretty fast path to getting into an altered state through sexuality, and that can be used to, imprint. Essentially for me, if there's a goal or something that I want, if I can run it through my whole body and that arousal bliss state is still there, then I'm pretty congruent with that thing. Sometimes if you're calling in something big, you're going to move like grief or shame or a blockage that, I wouldn't have that blockage just to touch myself. But as soon as it's like, my business has achieved this, or I've called in this partner, or this has happened, the journey suddenly takes this different flavor of like, oh, well, you got to work that through, and you might be crying, or you might be coming against, finding yourself closing. And then I would use breath and movement to reopen and run that thing all the way through. And so this can be done a million different ways. Like I do a lot of different ritual practices, exercises, but essentially I feel like people a long time ago knew about this, and sex has kind of become this kind of junk food thing for the most part of like, watch RedTube and jerk off or like whatever it is. But as Tantra also teaches, these states can be used to get us into much more high states of consciousness. So there's also a sense of like, this is part of, I teach with ISTA as well, which is International School of Temple Arts. That world, which calls itself shamanic Tantra, it's almost like what ayahuasca shamans are doing with ayahuasca, we're doing with Eros as our primary medicine. And so the more skillful we get with opening the body into different states, the more different things we can use it for, and healing is a big one as well, like healing past trauma, healing past life trauma, healing anything, it can be done really quickly and really easily in like a 1 hour, 2 hour bodywork session, which I would also see that as sex magic as well.
Yeah, cool. And sex magic obviously is something you just do by yourself. You can do it with a practitioner, and then you can also do it with your partner, I'm assuming.
Partner, I run group things, which the first is not necessarily a group orgy of everyone touching each other like church. The thing I mentioned is like a solo practice in group.
That even just that terrifies me.
As for most people it would.
And it's like, that idea of being in a circle and being guided into a sex magic practice, and like being almost, I would feel like, if you're talking about the body, I can feel the closure of like people might see me do something that isn't normal. I can feel that. I'm like, oh wow, that's a.
And so imagine like, let's say you went to 4 of those, imagine the difference in your life if you've reached a place where like, oh, my connection to self and my erotic current is strong enough that I could be in a room with other people and I'm neither ashamed of what they think, nor am I like lusting after other. It's like I'm just connected in myself and I'm at ease. There's something around reconnecting, because if you think of like, if we talk chakras, it's lower chakra stuff, base and sacral. We have a lot of shame, guilt, fear around those levels of our being. And once that starts to move out, we move through the world differently, and this can be done without, no one's got to touch anyone, fuck anyone, do anything really. And I know this is considered weird, but I've reached a point where I'm like, it's kind of weird that we don't have that. You know? Like, because sexuality is innocent,
Yeah. And for me, like my upbringing, sexuality was the devil.
Right.
It was literally it was the devil. We don't talk about it. We don't approach it, and it's not, it doesn't happen here.
Yep.
And it's like,
it's funny because you get to a certain age, like, I think it is happening here still. It's just pushed really deep into the shadows. The priest did what? It's like,
when?
Why does this keep happening? It's like, well, maybe because you guys created a religious system that shames something that is part of us.
Yes.
And that is dysfunctional, And so bad things happen.
Yeah. Sex at Dawn was a book that I read, and that kind of showed me that, this is fucking shady what's going on here. Like the TV, the TV channels, they were promoting the happy Christian family, moral Christian values, and then they also owned all the porn channels.
Right,
and they were selling them to
both sides,
and the porn was making like 5 times more than the TV.
And the Christians are watching
and
porn.
The Christians were, and it was the men that were watching it.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's crazy and I was like, holy fuck. Like it was a mind blowing moment for me. I'm like, so my desire and my lust and this pleasure state, this is not bad. I don't need to force this into the, down deep within me and hide it, or, go in and watch porn in the darkness. Like I can find a way to be with this energy that doesn't require me to hide it.
Yeah. And, I just want to be clear, like where I'm standing or what I'm kind of advocating for is not the position that like just splashing sexual energy everywhere unconsciously is not, that's not the world that I see as the solution either. That's actually something that happens because we're quite immature with it, and people, let's say people finally get the early stages of a little bit of sexual liberation, then it's like everyone wants to fuck everyone, everything's running everywhere, and it's like, okay, well, essentially what you've got to look at is like, okay, so we've reached like a sort of early teens level of maturity here. You've done one tantra workshop and now you're a kind of tantric fuckboy. That's great, but we can't stop at that level.
Yes.
And, we're not trivializing abuse, trauma, harm that has come from the unconscious channeling of sexual appetite. So there is a logical and sane reason in the early stages of these Abrahamic religions of putting some rules on that stuff.
Yes.
They weren't insane. They weren't evil. There was this is my read on it as kind of a religion history nerd, like there was an evolution happening where we're wanting to move from maybe more pagan, earth-based, would have been more erotically connected religions that were a little more dark, for want of a better word, not evil, but more connected to the darker, denser.
Yeah.
As this sort of Christian style frame comes in, which is much more like, there is a higher consciousness being called by that stuff. But I guess because of the level of awareness, integration, whatever, it was done really violently. So it's like, okay, we're killing all the witches, we're shaming all the fertility cults, we're murdering all the whatever, and so there's this pushing of it into shadow, but this desire to add consciousness and connection to like the one, I think is a functional part of spiritual evolution on the planet. It's just that it was done in like a repression, like a harsh father kind of form, when actually if we could integrate like Team Christian and Team Witch into one synthesized thing, you'd have a functional society.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think about like deep roots, tall tree. I think it's like you cut the roots off the tree that's growing to the sky, it's going to fall over eventually.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like that reaching. And I did, like, I had like the psychedelic experiences. Like, I now understand what it feels like. This feels like unconditional love. Oh my God. And then for 2 years, drinking medicine, and then I drank medicine and it went all the way down. I went, and I was like, what the fuck? And that was kind of we've shown you this, but now we're going to show you this.
Yeah.
And that was a real confronting but necessary part of the journey for me. It's like I have to go back in and find this connection. And far out, man. Like, I think you've really,
I would say like my first
really well.
10, 13, 15 years of spiritual journey was ascension based.
Yeah.
And then in my 30s started to identify, I'm not that in my body. I'm not that connected to my sexuality. I don't really know how to channel and use emotions well. I've been more like regulating them with like witness consciousness and, intelligence and focus and whatnot. And then it's like, okay, we have to unlock the descent journey. And then now I would say there's a reasonable marriage of both. Like, I could still work that more, but like they are both somewhat in harmony. And it's like, but it's tricky to find the descent ones because all of the dominant spiritual practices you first find, meditation, Christianity, Abraham Hicks, whatever it is, it's all about like,
shout out to Abraham Hicks.
Yeah, I love that stuff, But it's like, yes, great, you guys are so conscious, but at some point you're going to have to stick something up your ass because you guys are really fucking repressed and blocked.
You're going to have to open up.
There's no skipping it,
Yeah. It's so funny when that came around, like, to putting something out, like when I had to, like, I was like, I have to put something in my ass. Like, it came to me, I was like, this is the time. I'm like, fuck, what the fuck?
I mean, I don't know if you've ever sat there like on acid or stoned or just in a whimsical moment of like, isn't it crazy that like some parts of the body are like, ooh, the crown, so holy. And other parts like, ooh, that's a bad part of the body. That part's evil. This part's dirty. Stay away from it. And it's like, and it's coded into kids. You're like, ooh, poo, ha ha. It's like from day one, it's like, that's the bad part, And it's like, we've been on this planet for however million years and we still think that some parts are divine and some parts are not. Like, that's fucking insane. Feet are dirty, don't touch. And then like, yes, obviously practical, but it was like, okay, so walking on the earth is dirty. So the earth is dirty. So like nature is dirty. So indigenous cultures are dirty. So, it's not that hard to follow it and find like, there's kind of a colonial patriarchal thread in all of this fucking shit. Like, damn it.
Yeah, and now we've got like hand sanitizer at the front of every fucking store and like on everyone's bench. It's like everything's about like making sure that we're clean.
Yeah,
and that personally does my head in, and that was like my journey with like unlocking. Like, I had some pretty somatic experiences with like self pleasure and butt play and like learning what it meant to open.
Yeah,
and like surrender, which was so foreign to me.
And it's, I think there's 3 or 4 paths that open up all this stuff that's in the shadow, and definitely sex is one of them. But for me, at the end of the day, it's death. Death is the one. It's like birth and death are the biggest truths, you've have had kids. That's a huge initiation, right?
Yeah.
There's only one other that's as big, if not bigger than that, which is like the one when you leave the planet, you know? And it's like we're so death negative in our culture. Like we just don't want to deal with that. And that, yes, is the physical practical of death, like, you know, put them in of don't look at it kind of thing. But it's also egoic death, letting go of control, you know, and like if we look at the ass and the asshole, a lot of it is to do with like, you know, when someone gets hanged or whatever, they shit themselves. There's a letting go of control, there's a surrender, and there's a shame around all that, and it's really close to, you know, the fear of death, the fear of ego death. Like I remember growing up, this is so wild. My biggest fear was like, I don't want to go to jail because if I go to jail, I'll be fucked in the ass, you know? And that would obviously mean that I'm gay, and I don't want to be, I'm not gay. And it's like a 13-year-old, it's like, where does this come from? And it's like, that would be the worst thing, and I'm afraid of it. And it was really ironic because I got in lots of trouble with the law, and always this fear was like, fuck, am I going to go to jail and get fucked in the ass because I really don't want that because I'm not gay, okay? And it's just like, what has happened to how did this get coded into me? Like, it's so strange that was like the worst, that was the fate worse than death, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so like the idea of, and that was like such a terror. Like I was so scared of being gay. That's another like, yeah, dude, it was worse than death.
Yeah,
and I think for like, you know, suicide is pretty strong in the men, you know, for men. It's a pretty fucked up thing that happens a lot for men in their between their like mid-20s and mid-40s. A lot, like it's fucked up, and I think for me it has a lot to do with the shame. Like, and from what I've experienced in the men's workspace, in the processes that we provide, like a lot of stuff tracks back to like sexuality, and not being able to explore that appropriately. And I think for a lot of men, myself included, like I said, that church self-pleasure space, that scares me.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty open compared to, you know, a lot of the men. And if we're going to add some value here in regards to some stuff that people can take away, because I want to kind of frame it is like, if a guy wants to explore this, how does he go about it? If he's like straight, like this straight dude that's like always done what he's always done, and he's like kind of, he's feeling the pull to explore this, or he can feel those deeper desires and is scared of them. What are some steps that he can take if we're going to put the teacher hat on you?
Yeah, I mean, in real life, this would be very tailored to where someone is at in their journey. But I think for me, a lot of this started with tracking fears and shadows, and then going towards the ones that I felt like I could dare to go towards.
Yeah.
And so I just want to touch on something underlying what you just said. You know, we're afraid of certain elements of sexuality, but we're really also afraid of feeling and raw emotion. And I think that's why sexuality can be challenging for men, because you know, there's all this conditioning around wanting to be like a good lover or a good whatever. But the journey to actually having that is about surrender and being able to open and being able to like surf the currents of like wild emotion and energy, which is by definition, if we're going to use these terms, the feminine. And so the practical approach is, on some level, you need to find a way to integrate, quote unquote, your feminine.
Yeah.
Which we could debate whether that's even a good label, but by which I mean emotion, feeling, eros, being out of control, letting go of control, letting go of power, although ironically power's on the other side. So like, it depends where you're at, but like feeling feelings, being with feelings will be a start. So like, you know, depending on how early in the journey, like I think men's work and men's groups are really a good start. If that's not already there, of like being able to talk about feelings is a good start. But then the next step is being able to actually connect to and express feelings. And then I think if someone is ready to go into the sexuality space, I think Tantra workshops are a really good start. If you're really scared, beginnerish things are good, because then there's nothing going to be there that's really that scary. It's just, you know, I think things like self-pleasure without agenda is really good. So like, you know, we're all trained to kind of visualize, you know, since I was in high school, it's like, oh, this girl that I want to fuck at school, or the teacher that I want to fuck at school, or whatever improbable scenario that makes me aroused, you know?
Yes.
You know, this pop star, it's like, okay, a 13-year-old boy, you're never going to get that, but I understand why it's exciting. All that is sort of a barrier to the real thing. By the real thing, I mean like, you know, standing in the bathroom with the door closed and doing 20 minutes or 10 minutes of just self-touch, like legs, belly, body, breathing, feeling what's there, and meeting what's there, I think is really where it's at, you know? If you're a super mask achiever, fit bro dude, you got to find some opposites. You know, if you're a kickboxer, fucking take up yin yoga, you know? It's like, it's almost laughably simple, but it's like, basically the game for me is integrating opposites.
Yeah.
So if I'm a super cognitive genius fucking crypto trader, you got to find a way to feel your feelings. Go get a fucking tantra massage. If that's too much, massage and body work, you know, just whatever you know you're lacking in, start leaning into it. And it doesn't have to be, it's another mask thing. You don't have to fucking skydive and throw yourself into things that scare the shit out of you. It can be gradual, but I would say self-pleasure, dance sounds hilarious, you know, but like dance, non-linear movement, things that are going to open up flow are a really good place to start.
Yeah, that's so, yeah, I love it because like we have a lot of guys come through the men's circles, they come to the retreats and it's like, there's like, yeah, how do I keep, and we did this year, we actually brought in a whole lot of more creative arts into the actual men's retreat. So it wasn't just the wrestling and the breath work and the you know, the kind of the spike and the shame circle and all this crazy stuff. You know, we brought in, we had a brother come in and we did dance one morning and all the guys were like so enlivened. And I think, you know, dance is for me, what's really unlocked that part for me is like singing.
Yeah, 100%.
Singing has been huge. Like none of this is actually about, like there's no sex. It's like there's energy flowing, and like I think like what I'm learning more and more is around like the energetics rather than it being I have to do it this way.
Yes,
and this is the path.
It's to work from the opposites from kind of first principles. You know, the way I look at it is that we are all of it, and you know, there's in a lot of like spiritual community, there's like a really reinforcing of like gender identity and norms, and that's fine. Like if you didn't really get to anchor those in your life, it's probably good to inhabit them and feel what it feels like to be, I finally feel like a man, you know, great. And I'm so feminine, I'm a woman, you know, awesome. But from like a soul point of view or from a spirit point of view, you're fucking everything. And from that first, you know, day of like, oh, got a little dick, he's a boy, wears blue, shouldn't be crying. You know, it's all loaded in so quickly and so deeply that you can be 50 years old and haven't cracked the code that like, spoiler alert, you're all of it. And like, how do we get to a world where like dancing and singing, like even the fact that I'm like, yes, take up some feminine practices like singing. Like how the fuck is that inherently, in what way has that been linked to like biology and also gender? That's just fucking insane.
Yes.
But what? Because the guy, you know, and how much to like growing up, like it was so confusing to me that like all the girls would love the guy singing and playing guitar, even though something in me was like gay, you know? Ugh. And like, why is it? Because like there's feelings, because there's vulnerability, and it's like, I'm going to be as tough as I can possibly be. And in my like preteen logic, that would make me more attractive to women because I'm doing a good, you know, a good performance of masculinity. I guess I wouldn't use that language, you know, but like I'm doing a good job of pretending that I'm really masculine. So therefore women who are feminine would want me.
Yeah.
And then in my 20s and 30s and even more in my 40s, the more I've embraced all these things that are like taboo or opposite or whatever, the more secure I feel in myself, which I am in a male body. So, and it'd be like, oh, you're such and such type of man. I'm like, it's funny because I just started doing all the things that I wasn't really meant to do as a man, and I've become more full, which has made me more of a man. Like the categories are a mess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And yes, exploring them and anchoring the side that you were supposed to is great, but unlocking the side that you were not supposed to is going to give you massive returns, you know?
Man, I just like, I love that because like I kind of track ancient culture as like my reference point or culture in a sense, like these things that have rich culture. And I look at like African culture, or I look at like even like my lineage is back to Ireland, and the Irish culture, they'd sing.
They never stop singing.
They shut up. They don't shut up singing. Yeah. And it's like there's such a beauty to it. And they had a relationship with this, with almost the mystery, and they would sing to it. And they went through, really hard times, and song was what they did to alchemize it.
Yeah.
And that was the way they moved their grief. And I think that that's a big part that's missing from a lot of people's lives, is like these practices that aren't masculine or feminine. They're just a way of moving energy.
Yeah.
And that, like at funerals, when people like don't let themselves make noise, or they don't like have songs that allow energy to move through the space, it becomes this, we sterilize our existence.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a tragedy in my opinion.
It's such a thick layer of repression, and I'm sure you're across this. It's kind of like the conscious, not even conscious, like the hyper masculine alpha bro kind of internet podcasty world,
Yes.
Like, rate chicks and what's your body count and all that stuff.
Oh,
it's like they've refined fragility to like a badge of honor,
Yes.
Of like if I get pussy, I'm a hero. But if she's had, and it'd be like anyone who's had more than 3 partners is like run through. And I'm like, what? You want someone who's not even good in bed? Is that what I'm hearing? Like, because you're so fucking fragile that you need to be like dominant. And it's just like, it's like this inversion, of like the thing that we say it is what it's not. It's like this, I'm an alpha male. It's like, you're fucking terrified. Mm-hmm. And to just loop back to where we started, that world has a real shamey look at polyamory, and it's mostly along the lines of like, anyone who lets their bitch fuck another man is like not a man. And it's like, you have no idea the skill and the embodiment and the ability to meet your own emotions that would be required to do that. But it's just such an interesting inversion for me. It's almost like if someone tells you something isn't masculine, go do that thing and get comfortable with it, and you will ironically be more masculine.
Yeah, that is the funniest bit. And then you become, and then that then attracts, like for me, what I've found when I've done that, I'm like, I'm going to go and do the thing that I'm not meant to do. And when I've done it, it's not a big deal anymore.
Oh my God.
And then the relaxation that I feel in my nervous system, I then become a space for more of what I wanted in the first place.
So about 7 years ago, I did a workshop that was all men, and I didn't really know this, but I kind of had a clue, but I didn't know that basically the bulk of the week in various forms was us learning cock massage on each other, right?
Yeah.
So I probably gave like 12 cock massages that week, and I'm still not really super gay in my actual sexual appetites, right? I would say there's little percentages of like queerness and fluidity that has come into my identity over time. But then this was really not the case. Like I was pretty much, I'm a straight dude who's into tantra and into this and that, but whatever I'm going for, it wasn't that, Mm-hmm. And I remember driving out with the guy that I drove in with, and I was like, do you feel like more gay or less gay than when we got there? And it was just like, we just laughed because it was such a shadow had been lifted of like, really teenage stories of like, if I do this, I'm going to become gay, And like the funniest thing is like there was one gay dude and everyone else was very, very straight. So even though we were doing body work and touching genitals, we had like little kind of a temple night one evening, and it was just dudes sitting around talking. It was the same as like dudes sitting around with beer without the beer. Like there was nothing, it wasn't like we were all like cuddling and making out or something. It was like just dudes sitting there being very normal hetero dude bros, except we had done like some nature ritual and then like a cock massage ritual that afternoon. But it hadn't opened up any like gayness, which at the time, it's even hilarious that I'm saying this because it's a while ago now, but at the time there was something in me was like, this didn't like make us like, we're not suddenly leaning over and making out because I gave you body work. Like there's nothing. So what was so wild was in a way, nothing about my essence and my desires had changed at all. The only thing that was different was I had less stories around male bodies being around each other and genitals and touch. It was just like, like if I want to be like a tantric healer person, I'm going to touch genital. Like I opened up, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to work with men and women. I'd only been like, I will only work with women. And it's like, yeah, that's because you're still personally invested in like, what does this mean? Da, da, da. And as I was driving away, I was like, it literally means nothing. It just means that the fears that I had as a sort of 13-year-old, 16-year-old were very immature. Like, what if we have to sit next to each other? Maybe that's gay, you know? And it's like, there was that was the level of intelligence that was coming out of my body of like, well, if we do that, that'd be gay. And then I don't want to be gay because what all other schoolboys are going to laugh at you and bully you. It wasn't even about like sexuality. It was just about like being shamed or being categorized.
Yeah.
And we drove away and I was like, like, am I more gay? Less gay? It just doesn't make any sense anymore that was even a thing, you know?
It's not like that story is actually just dissolved.
They just weren't linked together.
Yeah.
It was just like nothing about that was gay or not. In fact, just that line of thinking and questioning just is really childish. Like it was just like, like if gay is someone who was sexually attracted to and has sex with other men, it's like I am not more that, I'm not less that, I'm just not really in that dialogue. And it was like, so the main thing that happened was those narratives got freed out of my body, I guess, which was like, that's not what I thought it would do.
Yeah. That's that was like for me when I got a butt plug and put it in my ass, I was like, what is this going to make? What does this now make me?
Right.
And it literally like, I was like, nothing. Nothing. Like,
it doesn't make you anything.
Yeah, it doesn't make me anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. All right.
It's like my own finger. Isn't that gay? It's like you gay with your, how would that work? What does that even mean? You know?
And it just made me like kind of chuckle. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then I just went about my life.
Yeah.
And I definitely had more openness and sensitivity to feeling all those things once I like, attuned to that. And I was like, I can feel better. But it's like, that story that I thought it was going to amplify or make me, that no longer exists.
Yeah. And it's, to me, this is where it's at, to kind of link it back to the sex magic, tantra, polyamory, all these things. What I'm interested in beyond these concepts is the somatic, the living of something in the body. That's more interesting to me than like, yes, conceptually I'm polyamory, but you're like fucking all shut down and or monogamous people, this or that. It's like what people can embody is much more relevant to who I would want to be around than what category they've decided they're in or what they identify. I'm this kind of spiritual person. And it's like, oh Lord, just like, and I think there's something for me that, we're really in the age of spiritual materialism where we get these concepts and we just make them part of our personality. We build a business out of it. And, I do this, I'm not shaming the whole thing, but if I really deeply tune into what spirituality is, it's actually the stripping away of concepts, not the collecting of like, I've got this cool idea, this sophisticated idea. I'm actually a tantra babe. I'm a Lemurian priestess. It's like, okay, you're fucking mentally ill, but let's just put that aside. I'm interested in what I can embody, and different practices have opened me up more. And like, from that point of view, like working on my deadlift has changed me as much as putting things in my ass or eye gazing with, like they've all done things to me that have made me different. And some of them are not categorized as like spiritual, but for me again, with this integration of the shadow, like I was not an athlete or a gym person or whatever. So in my 30s, I took up like getting into weight training and facing a lot of like fears of like the people I used to hate were the ones, the jocks were my enemy. And so if I lift weights, if I lift a heavy weight, will I become a jock? And it's like, that's the same as like, if you stick something in your ass, will you become, it's so childish. And as soon as I started doing it, it was like, oh my God, like I'm stronger, I'm fitter, I feel better, I'm more embodied. It's like, yeah, that is spiritual practice,
Love it, man. I'm feeling close to complete. Is there anything else that you feel we need to traverse or anything else that's sort of sitting there?
Nothing burning, if I'm honest. I feel like we covered some really good ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I just want to like reiterate with the conversation that we've had, if anyone's listening, like this is like beyond, like for me, this is like taking a look at what's beneath a lot of the stuff that's being shared online right now.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of going another layer deeper, and there's going to be more and more layers. But like, if you're someone who is identified with something and it becomes like rigid, like, just like what Dane said, is like, what's the opposite of that? And can you go and engage with it and find a way to meet it, to see that it's not going to actually change who you inherently are at your core?
And I guess this is, because for me, like, I work with wealth, I work with sexuality, I work with kind of like magic / the occult. I work a lot with like soul and soul purpose. There's a, shadow work. There's this collection of all these things, but really it stems from a belief that the goal is wholeness.
Yeah.
The goal is not to be good. The goal is not to win. The goal is not to do all these things that we're kind of conditioned into, which are kind of quite lopsided things. The goal for me is just, can I become more whole every day, every year that I'm alive? And that because that's not what everyone is taught or what they're working towards, that can produce some interesting results. Like, he just took up dance, but I thought he was a kickboxer. And it's like, yeah, the dude is trying to become more of a whole being,
Yes.
And that also takes out, like, let's say you are taking on these things that are a little bit the opposite. You don't have to become the best at them.
Yes.
You might be the jiu-jitsu black belt who takes up fucking contact dance or whatever as a little counterbalance.
Yeah.
Or the IT nerd who gets in a little bit into sexuality. You don't have to become the tantra guru, but like, there's such a high return on, like, just one little droplet of that in your potion will make you a richer, deeper human being. And I know we haven't really been talking from this point of view, but I know it's there. And when it comes to sex, relationships, attraction, like, the polarity conversation is the one that's popular, but there's a deeper power than polarity, which is wholeness. And like, wholeness is the most attractive thing. And it also gets you more ease at polarity. Because if I'm all of it, sure, you can dom me. I'm not afraid. Cool, I'll scream and do what you tell me. Actually, now I'm going to dom you. Actually, I can be light. Actually, I'm dark. Actually, I'm in my mask. Actually, I'm kind of feminine. Like, it's all available. So polarity is very easy if you are not afraid to be all of yourself. But that wholeness, when it comes to attraction, both sexual, but also like business, friends, whatever, like, people who are fully developed are really enjoyable to be around.
Yes.
Like, because we all inherently want that deep down, I think. So I think that's the final bit I want to drop is like self-actualization, becoming whole, realizing that the soul or the essence of us is everything. It's not a man or a woman or a light or a dark or a goodie or a baddie or whatever. It's fucking everything. And that's where I'm trying to come from.
Fuck yeah. Thanks for sharing, man. This has been, I feel like I've taken so much from this. So you've got a few things coming up, bro. If we wanted to plant the seed, we'll put everything in the show notes, of course, but is there anything that you want to invite people into or share a little bit about your work?
Yeah, I got a few things on the cook that'll be all around for 2025. So I have something called Permission, which is a mentorship for conscious leaders, people who want to like make a ripple in the world, particularly around the energy of like, maybe you've got something amazing, but you're a little bit afraid to get canceled, or you don't want to be too much, or you're at a certain level, but if you go to the next level, it'll be scary. Like, I'm really good at that, and I'm really good at supporting people in that. So that's called Permission, and it's an ongoing. And I also have something called the Dark Field, which is more $100 a month, and it's a connection to sex, magic, self-pleasure, meditation, etc. Like every month we do online ritual. So for people who want to connect more to that magical dark side, but not really dark side, like wholeness, that's there. You can follow me on Instagram. I share all my stuff there. And I just put out a song called Magic is Real, which, if you want to just get the little microdose and maybe change your worldview a little bit, that's on Spotify. You can listen to that.
We're going to put all those in the show notes, man.
Sick.
So good to connect and spend a bit of time with you, man. I feel like, this is the beginning of, a lot of cool conversations and, a deeper relationship. So, bro, I appreciate you making the trip down the mountain and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me.
Bless up, beautiful people.
Peace.
Peace.